Hello, welcome back. Happy May. And if you're new to my channel, it's nice to meet you. My name is Suzanne. I'm a certified astrologer. I love all types of astrology, but I specialize in evolutionary astrology, horary astrology, and a modality called human design. If you want to find out more about my work, I'd love to meet you. You can visit gohigherfrequency.com. This year, I've been practicing my astrology through a mundane lens. I don't specialize in mundane astrology, but I don't know about you. I've been trying to figure out what the fuck is going on in the world, especially in the United States. And I find that astrology really helps me take a step back and view things from an objective point of view, or as objectively as I can. I definitely have a frame of reference and preferences, but I find that astrology really helps me keep from being drawn into the drama that is happening on our national stage. And it helps me focus my energies as productively as possible. So I'm offering this content in hopes that it helps you too. Now, this week, I wanted to look at the upcoming full moon in Scorpio happening on May 12th, but I'm also going to take a look at the Pluto retrograde that is happening this Sunday on May 4th. So if you're interested in that content, stick around. This month's full moon in Scorpio has its spotlight on the father of chaos, Uranus. Uranus supports this desire in each of us for a fundamental shift in the reality around us. But our dreams of quick, bold moves out of this current reality are deadlocked right now in a fixed environment. It's time to dig deep and question where the roadblocks actually exist. Is it in ourselves or is it the other? Is it both or is it neither? Are we all locked into this polarity of duality, and can we break free from these extremes of our fixed positions to ride the middle path like the priestess? Raven Caldera describes the Scorpio full moon as the priestess moon. She says this about Scorpio and the priestess. Scorpio loves dualities. In fact, no one is quite as good as Scorpio at attempting to divide everything into piles of black and white, good and evil, with her or against her, something to be loved passionately and something to be hated passionately. The priestess sits between the pillars because she has made a breakthrough that is one of the most difficult for Scorpio. Understanding that there is no great gulf between one and another, no matter which great and terrible duality it may be. She has learned that really it's all shades of gray, and no end is better than the other, and where we sit is the middle. I have been watching a lot of analysis lately that talks about the precarious position that we're in and all of the changes that we've been trying to implement and how little margin of error that we have right now before something catastrophic collapses the world order, basically. And it's kind of like that tower card that we've pulled. Any wrong move can pull the whole structure down. It reminded me of what astrologer Rick Levine has pointed out, that like a frog that we're cooking on a slow boil, it doesn't recognize that it's dying because it's on this slow boil until it's too late. And so we've been traveling this path toward our destruction, and now we're turning it up. So we're all aware that we're burning alive, and which is worse, I think, depends on your perspective. Like, were you hoping that some superhero was going to come in and save you? And was this president your hope for this superhero? And I think that depends on how you see things. And it could be either, because we're being woken up. We're being shaken up to the reality of our situation so that we have a chance to empower ourselves to look at things from a more realistic perspective, to look at the rest of the world and see that we've been in this kind of sweet spot. We've kind of been in a trance, and now we're getting a chance to wake up and take a look at our situation more realistically. And we have a chance to empower ourselves to make a change for the better or for the worse. And I think it's still up to us to decide which direction that we take, but we must wake up. And the transits are all describing that. It's not as if they weren't going to happen if this person didn't come into office. They were going to happen. And so this is an opportunity, like all opportunities, to really take a good look at ourselves and what road we've been traveling, and has it been productive? And now that we see the path more clearly, we've been shaken up to see, is this the direction we really want to take? Perhaps no, but we each need to take action and look around at the people who want to take action toward this future and make our own decisions on what that's going to be. So again, it's an opportunity. We've pulled this Tower card, and any wrong move can pull the whole structure down. And I think it's very possible that we need to see this whole structure torn down so that we can move forward in some way. But can we more easily rise from the ashes when we're free from the shackles that bind us, from the paralysis of Pisces that is kind of in this dream fantasy world? The Neptune on the North Node, we're in a trance and hoping that somebody is going to save us. Will we wake up and realize we've simply put ourselves in the prison of our own making with what we've been doing? Or are we going to actually empower ourselves on this journey of service to helping others empower themselves? And what position are we going to take rather than blaming the other? How are we going to take steps toward the place that we want to go? And are we going to leave it up to the powers that be to lead us into a quickening of our destruction? I think it's all something to think about as we go into this full moon. So before we take a look at the Scorpio full moon chart, I wanted to quickly look at the Pluto stationing retrograde chart, and I pulled in the Libra full moon chart into this image because some of the themes that were happening during that time period are showing up in different ways in this Pluto stationing retrograde chart. Pluto stationing retrograde happens on May 4th. This Sunday, and we're already seeing some of those themes play out in the media. I'm not sure if you watched my Libra full moon chart, but during that time period was right after the administration rolled out the reciprocal tariffs. And during that time, Doge was very active in pushing out the governmental workers and basically decimating some of those agencies. And in that Libra full moon video, I pointed out the Sabian symbol of the midheaven in this chart and was very intrigued by it because the Sabian symbol is a communist activist spreading his revolutionary ideals. And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And right after I put out that video, I came across a quote from the Secretary of Commerce that basically said, well, we're pushing out all of the knowledge workers so that they can be available when we bring the factories back to the US. And I thought that was very interesting because it reminded me of the Mao Revolution, where they pushed all of the knowledge workers into the fields, very similar to that. And also you see here in the Libra full moon chart that we have the sun conjunct Chiron in the sixth house. And that really is shining the light on the themes of the tariffs and bringing the factories back to the US. If you know anything about China and Russia, the leaders of those countries, you know that they have the Saturn-Neptune degree pretty much on this full moon in Libra. And so we are seeing those themes play out very loudly. As you can see, we have Mercury and Chiron up at the top of the Pluto retrograde chart. And Mercury is applying to a conjunction with Chiron, but it's on the exact degree of the US Sibley chart. And that Sabian, I know it very well because it's the Chiron of my chart. And it's called the pugilist entering the ring for a fight. But it's basically about fighting against your adversaries. It makes you stronger. And it's in the US Sibley's fourth house. And it's ruled by Mars in Gemini in our seventh house of the Sibley chart. And Jupiter has just transitioned over that degree. And when you think about Mars in Gemini, you think about our strength is in our diversity. And some of the things that the administration has been fighting against is the strength of our diversity in our country and in our relationships. We see that we're really confronting this from a perspective of how it's playing out on the national stage through our communication. And then Mars is on that Sabian symbol in the first house with the moon. And we've already seen some defensiveness around how we needed to just buck up and wait for the results to come in. We needed to bide our time, buy one doll instead of 20 for our children, and just wait a little while for the factories to start opening up in the US again. So there has been a lot of defensiveness of this strategy. And we definitely needed to wean ourselves off from relying on another country for our cheap goods. We say, oh, these other countries are taking advantage of us, but we're also taking advantage of them because we would not be able to afford these products if they were made in the US. We would not be able to live the same lifestyle as we have been living. Now, is that good or bad? I think it depends on your perspective and whether you think that we deserve to have a certain lifestyle and other people in other countries don't deserve that. But at the same time, it's a little bit out of touch. There's a lot of people in the United States that don't have money to feed their children, let alone buy them $20. So it's very specific to a certain audience. We have really these ideals that we all want to go forth to with Neptune, Venus here together in the ninth house. There's these ideals that we're going to be able to create better deals with other countries so that they don't, quote, take advantage of us. And then also I wanted to point out that Jupiter is intercepted in this chart in the 11th house. So we've got these fantasies that we really want to put in place, but the reality of that is very different from our fantasies. We're also coming up to the first square to the new moon in Leo last August. And there's this idea of what we promised during that time. There was a lot of talking from this administration about how we're going to make America great again. We're going to take away the taxes of Social Security benefits and tips and things like that. So we made all these promises, and now there's a lot of pressure to actualize those promises. And now we see that the Libra full moon is very close to this. You see now the Black Moon Lilith is on the IC of this chart in Libra. And it was on the chart last time, too. It was near the moon in Libra at that time. And it really describes some dark thoughts and dark plans that are happening with our partners. If you think about their charts, that's what I see anyway. Some dark thoughts and dark plans based on what they've been experiencing. I think we'll see that play out eventually. But my hope is that we come to some awakening, and we start to work more collaboratively with others. Maybe that's a Pollyanna wish, but that is my wish and my hope for our country. So let's talk about the full moon in Scorpio chart. This full moon is related to the new moon in Scorpio that was on November 13th, 2023. So if you think back during that time period, you might see some of the themes that were seeded during that time come into illumination of some form, come into manifestation so that you could see those themes in a new way. That new moon was at 22 degrees of Scorpio, conjunct Mars. So very Mars themed, and it was opposing Uranus. So it was about some kind of power struggle, some kind of new beginning that you wanted to see happen in the world, and you wanted to start something new based on that chaos that you saw that was opposing that new moon. And now we're seeing it from the other side. We're seeing Uranus on this sun in this full moon. And so we're seeing that Uranian energy fully illuminated. And if you have personal planets at 22 degrees of the fixed signs, you're more likely to feel this full moon more personally. And if you know the leader of our country's chart, you'll notice that his chart lines up with this full moon. Mars is right on the ascendant of this full moon, and the Uranus and the sun are very near his midheaven. And I thought it was interesting that Hygeia was at the exact degree of Uranus. I'm not an expert on Hygeia at all, but I know that it has to do with health. And I know that we're looking at the health of our country and its finances, and whether what's happening right now is sustainable or not, and whether our values are very healthy, and whether this chaos is actually a symptom of our health. But as you can see, we're seeing Uranus here on a fixed cross. And if you know anything about fixed energy, you know how immovable that energy can be. And it really does take a planet like Uranus to break things free. It's like, I think of it like an ice cube that is contracting and it just like explodes. And that's what Uranus energy does. But it just takes that very Uranian chaotic rebellion to kind of blow everything apart for fixed energy to move sometimes. Unfortunately, fixed energy is fixed for a reason. It helps us solidify and to create stable environments so that we can grow. But at a certain point, it needs to move beyond the fixedness because we all go through stages like, the rest of the world does, the seasons. We need to change at some point, but we get really fixed in the things that we create sometimes because it makes us feel more secure and safe. And so sometimes we need that Uranian energy to really break things apart. But like I said, we're in a very fixed environment. So some of these bold moves do have a danger to collapse and destroy things that we didn't want destroyed, good things that we didn't want destroyed. And then it's chaos after that. And what's going to happen? Who's going to pick up the pieces? Who's going to lead that effort? And do we have the right people that are leading that effort? Think about the Leos, the Taurians, the Scorpios, the Aquarians in your life. See how fixed they can be. It'll help you relate to this energy and how it's very hard to move them when you need to move them. I'm an Aquarian. So I see this energy in myself. There was a lot of fixed beliefs that I had that needed to be broken down during my midlife crisis, cognitive dissonance that I had to go through because I had these fixed ideas and I didn't see the fixedness of them. I didn't see the other side of people seeing how fixed I was in my principles. I was basically condemning those people basically the same way that I saw as a problem with them, very fixed. And I know fixed energy very well. My mother is a Leo and my dad is a Scorpio. And funnily enough, I was the only Aquarian, and we didn't have any Taurians in our family, even though I have 8 brothers and sisters. I have pretty much every sign in my family except for the Taurian energy. But my mom's sister was a Taurus. And I just remember this time period when my mom wanted to go back to school, and her sister was coming into town with her husband to attend Rhema Bible College. And my mom recruited her to help her with her kids. But I just remember the power struggles that my dad and my mom and her sister had. You know, they paired up and they were against my dad. Oh, and it was nasty. It was nasty. And I, as the Aquarian, I was just a young child during that time. So I wasn't rebelling in the ways that I might have rebelled when I was older. But I do remember receiving that, and it was not very fun. And it couldn't have been fun for my father having 2 fixed energies come at him. But they're very stubborn in their own ways, in very different ways. And so we've got this very fixed cross, and we're all wanting things to change. And sometimes you've got that Uranian energy that has to break down the structures, even though it's very chaotic at the same time. And it's extremely emotional full moon. We've got a square between Mercury in Taurus and the Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto has just gone retrograde. And so you can see the themes of people being very fixed in their ideas of where we should head or who should blink first. You know, you need to do what I say according to my own needs, and it doesn't really matter what you need. There's no compromising there. And when there's no compromise, there's no movement, and there's destruction in that place, because we're living in a world where it's very difficult to not consider your partners. Our world is not as big as it once was, where we could have these kingdoms. There was still fighting back then, but it's not like we're self-sustaining countries anymore. We really do depend on each other. And so it's very difficult to demand cheaper and cheaper things and to create this ideal place where you're coming out on top, and even more and more and more and more. Because if you look at it from the wider perspective and you look at the United States, there's a lot of disparity in the haves and have-nots here, but even more so between our country and the rest of the world. And so to demand that the rest of the world bow to us is not very sustainable and not very fair, to be honest. And so sometimes people have to stand up because there's no room to negotiate anymore. And whether that's true or not, there's gradations of that. But we have to understand that there's got to be some compromise. And whether there's compromise or not, if we hold too firmly to our points of view, where we're coming from, we might lose everything. It might be the Tower card, where we're just, everything's broken down because it's not sustainable. And so what we're looking at is that, you know, this cracks that we see, and we're looking at, okay, well, where do we need to shift, and where do things need to change? And, you know, what do we want versus the collective, and what are our values, and where do we want to lead ourselves toward? Do we want to give up this idea of democracy and surrender to this place of fascism, where the have-nots and the haves are going to even be more extreme? We're going to be looking at that very closely during this Pluto retrograde, I think, and really coming to some new understandings of where we're headed forth. Now, Mars is in the 12th house of this chart. And so there's a lot of things that are happening. A lot of these charts have had a 12th house theme. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the background that we're not privy to. There's a lot of idealization of where we can go, a lot of people promising things that may or may not come to fruition. The 12th house is a place of our undoing sometimes. It can be a place where we self-sabotage because we're trying to make moves toward our fantasies of where we think we want to end, and it's not really realistic. There's only so much positive thinking can do. At some point, you've really got to deal with the reality. And a lot of people do live in this fantasy world where they just keep skipping from one place to the other, and they never get that come to Jesus moment, unfortunately. And they destroy in their wake other people's lives because they want to live out these fantasies of their own life. But when I think about the time period in the Scorpio new moon, my sun is at 22 Aquarius. So very much had to do with the struggle with other people during that time. I very clearly remember I was struggling with my teacher. I was struggling with my workplace. I was struggling with what I was going to do for my future, but it was oriented toward other people and how they were holding me back. And I was struggling with them. And now I am very clearly seeing the struggle that I'm having with myself outside of the external environment, because you need to find your own individuality and authenticity, but it needs to be centered in your own self and not trying to blame other people. Yes, they might have a role in what you're doing and what you're trying to struggle against, especially if they're not right partners for you, if they're not where you need to be headed for your career. For sure, you need to go through those struggles so you can find your own true, authentic path. But at some point, you have to look within and not blame others for being in your way. Well, how am I holding myself back? And can I live in my own truth and authenticity without having to compromise my own values, but also letting other people have their own authenticity and their own lives? And how can we come together in a place that is a win-win for each other? Or how can we choose other partners we can shine our lights together, rather than one being over the other? What can I do that shines my light in the presence of others? And how can I work in tandem with them? That has been a lifelong process for me. I did not grow up in a family that was very good at working together. Honestly, it felt like we were a house full of fixed energies, even though we weren't. Our parental model showed us this fighting, these fixed places where there was no or little compromise. So what do we do for ourselves, and how do we go internally to understand that it's not either or? We need to figure out a way to sit in the middle, like the priestess card. And just because one person does one thing does not make them evil and the other people good. There's been this moral certainty that has been one of the reasons that we're in this place today. People having very, very firm ideas about morality and shaming other people for their views and for what they do with their own lives. And so we're seeing the extremes of those positions very clearly. And we each have an opportunity to find the priestess in ourselves and to see things from this middle place and to see the ways that we're very fixed in our own belief systems, and to realize that we're treating others how we don't want to be treated. How are we experiencing that so that we can come to that middle ground so that we don't have to go to these extremes so much? Does it have to be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? We keep swinging back and forth. We're never going to move forward in a balanced way, in a healthy way, in a sustainable way. So I hope that's helpful for you to sit with and think about this month as we're getting a little bit of a reprieve from the intensity that was going on in prior months, although I'm doubting it's going to be less intense, hopefully less combative, but we'll see. Anyway, have a great couple of weeks. I'll see you next time. Bye.